I spent 33 years believing I was the responsible one, the daughter who kept the peace while everyone else panicked. But standing in the hospital waiting room, reaching into my mother's purse, I learned my reliability was just a blindfold. A single notification lit up her screen, wards only. And as I read the message, delete the screenshots, I realized I was not part of the family at all. I was the target. The notification on my banking app was green. A cheerful little bubble confirming that the transaction had cleared, $340.12. It was the final payment on a medical bill from 2 years ago. A lingering reminder of a benign cyst that had required minor surgery and a major deductible. I sat at my kitchen island in Brackenridge, Maryland, staring at the screen of my phone. The silence in my apartment was heavy, but it was a good kind of heavy. It was the weight of responsibility being lifted. I was 33 years old, and I did not owe anyone a single cent. I was the daughter who did not ask for help. That was my brand. In the Ward family ecosystem, roles were assigned early and adhered to with religious strictness. Sloan was the high achiever, the one whose crises were always existential and required family meetings. Evan was the baby, the one whose mistakes were charming and whose debts were quietly absorbed by the collective. And I was Natalie. Natalie the sensible, Natalie the steady, Natalie who handled her own insurance claims and never called home to complain about a flat tire. I placed my phone on the counter and looked around my living room. It was tidy, decorated in neutrals because they were on sale. Not because I lacked imagination. I had built a life that was small, manageable, and entirely mine. I worked a mid-level corporate job in logistics that paid the bills and offered a 401k match, and I spent my weekends hiking or reading or doing exactly what I was doing now, which was enjoying the peace of solvency. Then the phone buzzed. It was not a text. It was a call from my mother. Elise. My mother did not call at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday unless the world had stopped turning. I answered on the first ring. Mom? Natalie. Her voice was thin, like paper tearing. It is your father. He collapsed in the garden. The ambulance is taking us to Harborstone Medical Center right now. The calm that had settled over me 10 seconds ago evaporated. I grabbed my keys before she had even finished the sentence. I am on my way. I said, I will meet you in the emergency bay. I hung up and immediately dialed Sloan. My sister worked at a boutique PR firm in D.C., 40 minutes away from the hospital. She answered on the third ring, sounding breathless. I cannot talk right now. Nat, I am prepping for the gala launch. Dad collapsed, I said, cutting through her rehearsed busyness. He is on his way to Harborstone. Mom sounds terrified. There was a pause. But it was not the pause of someone grabbing their coat. It was the pause of someone checking their calendar. Oh my God, Sloan said. Is it serious? He is in an ambulance. Sloan, yes, it is serious. I cannot leave yet, she said, her voice pitching up into a whine that had worked on our parents since she was 6. If I leave before the client brief is signed, I will lose the account. Can you just get there and let me know? I will come as soon as I can. I did not argue. I never argued. Fine, I said. I hung up and called Evan. My brother was 28 and ostensibly worked in sales, though exactly what he sold remained a mystery to me. Yo, Evan said. Dad is in the hospital. I said, Harborstone. Get there. I am in Philly. He said instantly. You live in Baltimore. Evan? Yeah, but I had a networking thing. I cannot get back for at least 3 hours. Is he okay? I do not know. I said, just get there when you can. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat of my sedan and gripped the steering wheel. This was the pattern. This was always the pattern. Graham Ward collapses, and Natalie Ward drives. Natalie Ward sits in the waiting room. Natalie Ward fills out the admission forms because her handwriting is legible, and she knows her father's social security number by heart. Sloan and Evan would arrive later, breathless and dramatic, ready to hold hands and look concerned once the paperwork was filed and the hard waiting was over. The drive to Harborstone took 20 minutes. I parked in the garage, ignoring the exorbitant hourly rate, and ran toward the emergency entrance. The air inside smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee, the universal scent of bad news. I found my mother standing near the triage desk. Elise Ward was a woman who dressed for every occasion, even emergencies. She was wearing a structured cardigan and slacks, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. But her hands were trembling as she clutched her leather handbag. "Mom," I said, reaching her side. She looked at me, her eyes wide and glassy. "Oh, Natalie, thank goodness. They took him back 10 minutes ago. They will not let me in yet. They said they are stabilizing him." "What happened?" I asked, guiding her toward the stiff plastic chairs of the waiting area. "He was just pruning the hydrangeas," she said. He stood up, looked at me, and just folded over, like a rag doll. "Natalie, it was awful." I sat her down and rubbed her back. "You did the right thing calling the ambulance immediately. He is in the best place." She nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "I called Derek. He is on his way." Derek was my father's younger brother. Uncle Derek was a fixture in our lives, the successful investor who managed the family's larger financial picture, though the specifics of what that entailed were always vague to me. "Okay," I said. "That is good. Did you call Sloan and Evan?" I did. She said, "Sloan is stuck at work. Poor thing is under so much pressure. And Evan is traveling." I stiffened slightly. Poor thing. Sloan was under pressure because she refused to delegate, and Evan was traveling because he wanted to avoid responsibility. But I said nothing. I was the shock absorber. I absorbed the friction so the machine of the family could keep running. "I need to charge my phone," Mom said, fumbling with her bag. "I think I have a cord in here somewhere. My battery is red. I will find it," I said. I took the heavy leather bag from her lap. It was a chaotic abyss of receipts, lipstick tubes, and mints. I dug through the side pockets, looking for the white tangle of a charging cable. "Sit tight," I said. "I think I feel it at the bottom." My mother turned away from me to speak to a nurse who had just walked into the waiting area calling a name that was not ours. I had her bag on my knees, my hand deep inside, when her phone, which was sitting in the dedicated slip pocket on the side of the bag, lit up. I did not mean to look. It was a reflex. The screen brightened with a notification banner. It was a message from an app I used myself, WhatsApp, but the group name was what stopped my hand in midair. Wards only. There was a speech bubble emoji next to the name, and the number 8 in parentheses, indicating 8 unread messages. I froze. Wards only. We had a family group chat. It was called Ward Family Update. It included me, Sloan, Evan, Mom, Dad, and occasionally Uncle Derek. We used it to coordinate Thanksgiving and share photos of the dog. This was not that chat. The banner displayed the preview of the 2 most recent messages. The first was from a contact saved as Sloan. Delete the screenshots. The second was from Mom. We agreed. Not her. The air in the waiting room seemed to vanish. The sounds of the hospital, the squeak of rubber soles, the distant paging system, the hum of the vending machine, dropped away into a dull roar. We agreed. Not her. My mother was sitting 2 feet away from me. She was watching the nurse with a look of desperate concern for her husband. And simultaneously, her phone was receiving messages about excluding me. My stomach did not just drop. It inverted. It felt cold and heavy, like I had swallowed a stone. I stared at the screen for 1 second longer, searing the image into my brain. Wards only. Delete the screenshots. We agreed. Not her. Who was her? I was the her. I knew it with a certainty that vibrated in my teeth. I found the charger. I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Hollow. Mechanical. I pulled the white cable out of the bag and handed it to her. I did not mention the phone. I did not ask about the group chat. I did not scream. "Oh, thank you, darling," Elise said, taking the cord. She plugged it into the wall outlet behind her chair and connected her phone. She did not check her messages. She just set the phone face down on the armrest. I stared at the back of her phone case. It was a soft beige leather. It looked innocent. Why? The question hammered against the inside of my skull. Why would they have a separate group chat? Why would they need to agree on something involving me? Why would Sloan be talking about screenshots? I stood up. "Where are you going?" Mom asked, looking up at me. "I am going to get coffee." I said, "Do you want anything?" "No, I am too anxious to drink anything." I walked toward the cafeteria. I did not want coffee. I wanted to vomit. I walked until I was out of her line of sight. Then I leaned against the cold wall of the corridor near the elevators. I closed my eyes. We agreed. Not her. It was a tiny sentence, 5 syllables, but it was rewriting my entire history. I thought about the last Christmas. I had arrived at the house in Maple Hollow and felt a weird tension in the air. Sloan and Evan had been laughing in the kitchen, but they went silent when I pushed the door open. I had assumed they were gossiping about a mutual friend, or maybe complaining about Mom's cooking. I thought about the family vacation to the Outer Banks 3 years ago. They had picked the week I was busiest at work. I had told them I could not come. They had said, "Oh, what a shame. We will miss you." But they had not offered to change the dates. I had always told myself these were accidents, coincidences. I was the responsible one, the busy one, the independent one. They respected my time. They did not want to bother me. But standing in that hospital corridor, looking at the scuffed linoleum tiles, I realized I had been telling myself a fairy tale. I was not the independent one. I was the outsider. I took a deep breath, forcing the air into my lungs. My father was in a hospital bed somewhere behind those double doors. He might be dying. This was not the time to confront my mother about a text message, not letting her make it about herself. I stiffened. I had heard those words earlier. When I walked in, my mother had been whispering to someone, probably Derek, on the phone. She had said, "We have to keep Natalie calm. Do not let her make it about herself." Make it about myself? I was the one who drove the car. I was the one who signed the forms. I was the one who sat in the chair. I never made it about myself. I made it about getting things done. The injustice of it burned my throat. I walked back to the waiting room. I sat down next to my mother. I put my hand on her arm. "He is going to be okay." "Mom," I said. She covered my hand with hers. Her palm was warm. It felt like the hand that had smoothed my hair when I was sick with the flu in 4th grade. It felt like the hand of the woman who loved me. "I know," she said. "We just have to pray." I looked at her profile. She looked tired and fragile, and I wondered, for the first time in my life, if my mother was a liar. We were at the hospital for 6 hours. Graham Ward had suffered a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke. The doctors were optimistic, but they wanted to keep him for observation for at least 48 hours. He was sedated and resting. Sloan arrived at 5 in the afternoon, looking flustered and immaculate in a pencil skirt and heels. She hugged Mom, then gave me a quick, distracted squeeze. God, the traffic was a nightmare. Sloan said, "How is he?" "He is stable," I said. Evan arrived an hour later, smelling faintly of beer and breath mints. He looked pale. "Is he awake?" Evan asked. "No," Mom said, "but the doctor said his vitals are good." We stood in a circle around the hospital bed. My father looked small against the white sheets. His face was slack, his breathing rhythmic. I looked at the faces of my family. Sloan, wiping a tear that managed not to ruin her mascara. Evan, shifting his weight from foot to foot, checking his watch. Elise, holding Graham's hand with a devotion that seemed absolute. And then there was me, standing slightly apart, watching them. I wondered if they were thinking about the group chat. I wondered if they were messaging each other right now, in their pockets, vibrating against their thighs. She is staring at us. Act normal. I drove home alone at 10 that night. My apartment felt different when I unlocked the door. It felt colder. I stripped off my clothes and stood in the shower, letting the hot water beat against my neck. I tried to wash the hospital smell off my skin, but I could not wash away the image of the notification banner. I put on pajamas and got into bed, but sleep was impossible. I stared at the ceiling fan, watching the blades cut through the shadows. My mind began to trawl through the past decade, pulling up memories like old nets. My 30th birthday. Mom had forgotten to order the cake. We ended up with a grocery store sheet cake that said, "Happy Graduation," because it was the only one left. Everyone laughed about it. Classic ward chaos. They said, I laughed too. I did not want to be a spoilsport. When I needed a co-signer for my first apartment lease, Dad had hesitated. He said he did not want to entangle finances. I understood. I worked extra shifts and paid a higher deposit. 2 months later, he bought Evan a new truck because Evan's old one was not safe for the highway. I had rationalized it all. Evan needed help. I did not. It was a compliment to my competence. But what if it was not a compliment? What if it was a strategy? We agreed. Not her. What had they agreed on? The question gnawed at me until the sun began to bleed gray light through the blinds. At 7 a.m, my phone rang. It was Uncle Derek. "Natalie," he said. His voice was rich and baritone, a voice that sold insurance policies and calmed investors. "Your mother told me you were a rock yesterday." I sat up, rubbing my eyes. I just did what I had to do. "Derek, of course you did. You are a good girl." The phrase made my teeth ache. Good girl. I was 33. "Listen, Nat," he continued, "I am heading to the hospital to relieve your mother so she can get some rest. I wanted to give you a heads up. We are going to need to handle some paperwork regarding your father's affairs. Just temporary measures while he is incapacitated." "Okay," I said. "Do you need me to bring his file from the house? I know where he keeps the power of attorney documents." There was a pause, a beat of silence that lasted too long. "No," Derek said. "No. Do not worry about that. We have it in hand. The family is going to handle it internally. We are the family." "Derek," I said. "Right. Of course. I just meant, we do not want to burden you. You have your job, and you get so stressed about these administrative things." I gripped the phone tighter. I did not get stressed about administrative things. I lived for administrative things. I was a logistics manager. I do not mind. I said, "I want to help. I know you do, honey. But listen to me. Do not overcomplicate things. Your mother is fragile right now. She does not need too many cooks in the kitchen. Let me and Sloan handle the heavy lifting on the legal side. You just focus on being there for her emotionally, okay? Do not overcomplicate things." It sounded like advice. It felt like a threat. "Okay. Derek," I said. "Good. I will see you at the hospital later." He hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed. My heart was thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. Handle it internally. Do not overcomplicate things. They were closing ranks. I stood up. I was not going to the hospital. Not yet. I needed to go to Maple Hollow. My parents' house was a colonial in a quiet suburb where the lawns were manicured and the mailboxes were brick. I had my own key. I pulled into the driveway. The house looked empty. Elise was still at the hospital. Derek was on his way there. Sloan was at work. Evan was probably asleep. I let myself in. The house smelled of lemon polish and old paper. It was the smell of my childhood. I walked through the foyer, past the formal dining room that we only used at Thanksgiving, and toward the back of the house where my father's home office was located. I told myself I was there to get clothes for Mom. That was the truth. She needed fresh underwear and a change of slacks. But my feet moved toward the office door. It was closed. I turned the knob. It was unlocked. My father's office was a sanctuary of dark wood and leather. He liked to project the image of a serious man of business. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with biographies of presidents and history books. I walked to the desk. It was messy, which was unlike him. Papers were stacked in loose piles. I glanced at the wall behind the desk. There were the usual framed degrees and awards, but there was something new. A small, framed certificate hung near the window. It looked fresh. The glass was clean. Briar Ledger Advisory. Client Partnership. Recognition. I frowned. I knew my father's financial landscape. He banked with First National. He had investments with a broker in Baltimore. I had never heard of Briar Ledger Advisory. I moved behind the desk. I felt a spike of adrenaline, sharp and metallic. I was snooping. I was invading his privacy. Delete the screenshots. The memory of the text pushed me forward. I looked at the papers on the blotter. Utility bills, a subscription renewal for a golf magazine, and then, under a stack of unopened junk mail, I saw the corner of a blue folder. I pulled it out. The label was printed on a white adhesive strip. Ward Family Fund. Eligibility Review. My breath hitched. Ward Family Fund. I knew my parents had savings. I knew they had retirement accounts. I did not know there was a fund. A fund implied structure. It implied legal entities. It implied significant assets. An eligibility review. Who was being reviewed? I opened the folder. The first page was a dense wall of legal text. My eyes skimmed over phrases like beneficiary standing and fiduciary discretion. Then I saw a list of names. Graham Ward, Elise Ward, Derek Ward, Sloan Ward, Evan Ward. My name was not there. I scanned the page again. Maybe I missed it. Maybe it was on the next line. I flipped the page. There was a header. Proposed exclusions and risk mitigation. Underneath, there was a single bullet point. Subject: Natalie Ward. I felt like I had been punched in the solar plexus. The room seemed to tilt. I read the text below my name. Assessment of financial instability and potential for disruptive litigation. Recommendation to sever direct beneficiary status in favor of discretionary trust controlled by primary trustees. Financial instability? I paid my bills early. I had an 800 credit score. I drove a 6-year-old car to save on insurance. Disruptive litigation? I had never sued anyone in my life. I apologized when people bumped into me. This was fiction. It was a dossier on a stranger that happened to share my name. I heard a car door slam outside. Panic surged through me. I looked out the window. It was the neighbor, Mrs. Gable, getting her groceries. I let out a shaky breath. I could not take the folder. If I took it, they would know I had been here. They would know I knew. Derek had warned me not to overcomplicate things. If I stole this, I would be declaring war before I even understood the battlefield. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I opened the camera app. I hovered over the cover of the folder. Ward Family Fund. Eligibility Review. I snapped the photo. I flipped to the page with the list of names. Snap. I flipped to the page with my name and the lies about my instability. Snap. I shoved the folder back under the junk mail, trying to align the edges exactly as they had been. I backed away from the desk. I felt dirty. I felt like a criminal in my own father's house. I ran upstairs to my parents' bedroom. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and shoved random clothes into it. A blouse, slacks, underwear. I did not even look at what I was grabbing. I just needed to leave. I walked out of the house, locking the front door behind me. The sun was shining. The birds were singing. It was a beautiful Wednesday morning in Maple Hollow. I walked to my car, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. I threw the bag into the passenger seat. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white. I loved them. I loved my mother. I loved my father. I even loved Sloan and Evan, despite their selfishness, but they did not love me. Not really. They managed me. They discussed me in group chats I could not see. They wrote reports about my instability while I paid my own medical bills and drove myself to the hospital. They smiled at me at Thanksgiving and plotted to cut me out of a legacy I did not even know existed. I looked at the phone sitting in the cup holder. The photos were there. Evidence. I started the car. I was not Natalie the responsible anymore. I was not Natalie the peacekeeper. I was Natalie the target. And for the first time in 33 years, I was going to be exactly as difficult as they feared. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires like breaking bones. I headed back toward the hospital, a smile plastered on my face, ready to play my part. If they wanted a performance, I would give them one, but I would be reading from a different script. I sat in my car in the parking garage of Harborstone Medical Center, the engine idling just enough to keep the air conditioning running. The air inside the sedan was recycled and cool, a sharp contrast to the humid Maryland afternoon waiting outside. My phone was in my hand. the screen glowing with the photo I had taken in my father's office only 30 minutes ago. Briar Ledger Advisory. It was a name that sounded established. It sounded like mahogany desks, leather-bound portfolios, and centuries of stewardship. It was the kind of name designed to make you stop asking questions. I opened a browser tab and typed the name into the search bar. The website loaded instantly. It was sleek, minimalist, and expensive. The homepage featured a slow-motion video of a lighthouse standing against a crashing wave, overlaid with the text, "Navigating your legacy through turbulent waters." I scrolled down. The design was flawless, but the content was like spun sugar. It looked substantial until you tried to touch it. There were paragraphs about holistic wealth preservation and multi-generational strategic alignment. But there were no names, no Meet Our Team page, no photos of the partners, no history of the firm dating back to 19-something. I clicked on the About Us section. Briar Ledger Advisory is a boutique private client consultancy specializing in high-net-worth family governance. It was a sentence that meant absolutely nothing. I scrolled to the bottom of the page, looking for the footer. There, in tiny gray text, was an address, 1047 Oakwood Drive, Suite B, Caldwell Heights, Virginia. I switched apps to my map. I typed in the address. The satellite view loaded, zooming in on a suburban strip mall about 40 miles south of DRC. I pinched the screen to zoom in further. There was a dry cleaner, a vape shop, a nail salon. And right in the middle, a storefront with a generic sign, Postal Plus Shipping Center. I felt a cold prickle of sweat on the back of my neck. Suite B was not a corner office with a view of the Potomac. Suite B was a metal box in a strip mall where people rented mailboxes to hide their mail from the IRS or their spouses. My father, Graham Ward, was a man who prided himself on transparency. He did business with men he could look in the eye. He would never hire a firm that operated out of a mailbox next to a vape shop, unless he did not hire them. I closed the browser and stared at the dashboard. My hands were steady now. The shaking from the house had stopped, replaced by a low, humming vibration of focus. I was a logistics manager. My job was to track things, to find the bottlenecks, to identify where the inventory was leaking. I had just found the leak. I grabbed the duffel bag of clothes I had packed for my mother and stepped out of the car. The garage smelled of exhaust and damp concrete. I walked toward the elevator, adjusting the strap on my shoulder. I had to go back up there. I had to walk into that room and look at my family and pretend I did not know they were robbing me. When I reached the cardiac floor, the atmosphere had shifted. The quiet tension of the morning had been replaced by a performative bustle. I could hear Sloane's voice before I even rounded the corner to the waiting area. "I just need to know if the Wi-Fi in the private room is secure," Sloane was saying. "I have sensitive client documents I need to review while I sit with him." I walked into view. Sloane was standing at the nurse's station, one hand on her hip, the other holding her phone like a weapon. She was wearing a beige linen suit that looked effortless, but probably cost more than my first car. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, glossy bun. She turned and saw me. Her face crumpled instantly into a mask of tragic relief. "Natalie," she breathed. She closed the distance between us and wrapped me in a hug that smelled of expensive rose perfume. It was a hug for an audience. Her arms were tight, but her body was rigid, creating a distinct air gap between our chests. "I am so glad you are back," she said into my ear. "I have been holding it together for Mom, but I am barely hanging on." I pulled back and looked at her. Her eyes were dry, despite the wobble in her voice. "How is he?" I asked. "He is awake," she said. "He is groggy, but he knows we are here. Evan is inside with Mom now." I nodded. I held up the duffel bag. "I brought Mom's things. You are a lifesaver," Sloane said. She steered me toward the room as if I were a guest at a party she was hosting. Inside the hospital room, the blinds were drawn against the afternoon sun. My father lay in the bed, looking paler and smaller than he had the day before. The machines around him beeped in a steady, reassuring rhythm. Elise was sitting in the armchair next to the bed, holding his hand. Evan was sitting on the wide windowsill, his long legs stretched out, his face illuminated by the glow of his phone screen. "Hey," I said softly. Evan looked up. He looked tired, his hair messy in a way that was usually charming but today just looked unwashed. "Hey, Nat," he said. He did not get up. I walked over to the chair and set the bag down. "I got your things, Mom, the blue cardigan and the comfortable slacks, and your toiletries." Elise looked up at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but there was a tightness in her jaw that I recognized. It was her managing face. "Thank you, Natalie," she said. "You are very sweet." She did not let go of Dad's hand to hug me. "How are you doing?" I asked. "I am fine," she said quickly. "I am just focused on Graham." She paused, then looked at me with a strange intensity. "Derek called," she said. My stomach tightened. "Oh?" I said. "He said he spoke to you," she said. "He said he explained the situation with the paperwork. He said he was handling things," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Elise nodded. A little too vigorously. "Exactly. He is handling everything. The insurance, the bills, the fund maintenance." I had not asked about the fund. I had not asked about money at all. "That is good." I said, "I just do not want you to worry," Elise said. Her voice pitched up, becoming bright and brittle. "There is nothing to worry about financially. Derek has it all under control. We are completely secure. You do not need to stress yourself out about money. Natalie, I know how anxious you get about expenses." I stared at her. I was the one who had taught her how to use online banking. I was the one who had helped her refinance the mortgage 5 years ago when Dad was too busy. I was the one who tracked every penny of my own salary in a spreadsheet. "I am not anxious, Mom," I said. "I just want to help." "Well, the best way you can help is to just be a daughter," Sloane said from the doorway. She walked in, her heels clicking on the linoleum. "Let the professionals handle the business side. You just be present." It was a coordinated strike. Derek had briefed them. "Natalie will ask questions. Shut her down. Tell her she is too emotional to understand." I looked at my father. His eyes were closed. He was the only one in the room not lying to me. "I am going to go find the social worker," I said. "I need to give them his updated insurance card. I think the one on file is expired." I turned to leave. "Wait," Sloane said. I stopped. "You do not need to do that," she said. "I have the card in my purse. Sloane, it will take 2 minutes. I already did it," she said. I looked at her. Sloane did not carry insurance cards. Sloane did not fill out forms. Sloane hired assistants to return her library books. "You did?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "I met with the case manager an hour ago. I filled out all the intake forms. I listed myself as the primary family representative." The air in the room seemed to vanish. The primary family representative was the person the doctors called, the person who authorized tests, the person who controlled access. "Why would you do that?" I asked. "I live 20 minutes away. You live in D.C. If something happens in the middle of the night, I can be here in half the time." Sloane sighed, a long, exasperated sound that suggested I was being incredibly difficult. "Mom asked me to handle it. Natalie." I looked at Elise. She was studying the bedspread, avoiding my eyes. "Mom?" I asked. Elise looked up, flustered. "It just seemed easier. Natalie, she is very good at talking to doctors. She knows how to push for things. And we thought it would be better if there was just one point person, to avoid confusion." "Confusion?" I asked. "What confusion?" "We know how overwhelmed you get," Sloane cut in, "with your job. And your health history. We did not want to put more pressure on you." "My health history. 3 years ago, I had a panic attack. It was after a breakup and a grueling quarter at work. I had gone to urgent care because I thought I was having a heart attack. It turned out to be stress. I had taken a week off work. I had seen a therapist for 6 months. I was fine. But they had filed that away. They had turned a single week of human vulnerability into a diagnosis of permanent incompetence. I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck, but I forced it down. Derek said you would react like this. I took a breath. Okay, I said. If that is what you want. Sloane relaxed visibly. She thought she had won. It is just for the best, she said, patting my arm. I need to get some water, I said. I walked out of the room. I walked past the nurse's station. I walked past the elevators. I found a quiet alcove near the vending machines where the signal was strong. I pulled out my phone. I did not call the social worker. I did not call Derek. I called Hawthorne Weller, LLP. Mr. Weller had been my father's attorney for 30 years. He had drafted their wills. He had set up the original trust for my college education. If anyone knew what was happening, it was him. The phone rang 4 times before a receptionist picked up. Hawthorne and Weller. How may I direct your call? Hi, this is Natalie Ward, Graham Ward's daughter. Oh, hello, Ms. Ward. How can I help you? I was hoping to speak to Mr. Weller. I said, it is regarding my father. He is in the hospital. Oh, I am so sorry to hear that. Hold on one moment. Let me see if he is available. The line clicked to hold music. A generic classical piece played tinny and distant. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching the cars move on the highway below. The music stopped. Natalie? It was not Mr. Weller. It was his paralegal. Sarah. I had known her since I was 10. Hi, Sarah. Is Mr. Weller in? He is in a deposition. Honey, but I heard about your dad. Is he okay? He is stable. I said, but Sarah, I have a question. Has my dad been in to see Mr. Weller recently? Like, in the last few months? There was a pause. I could hear the clicking of a keyboard. No, Sarah said. I am looking at his file. We haven't seen Graham in, gosh, almost 2 years. Since he came in to update the deed on the beach house. Why? I frowned. Are you sure? I asked. No updates to his estate plan? No changes to a family fund? Fund? Sarah asked. What fund? The Ward Family Fund. I said. There was silence on the line. Natalie, Sarah said slowly, your father does not have a family fund managed by this office. We hold the wills and the insurance trust. That is it. My heart began to hammer. Okay, I said, but has anyone called? Maybe not Dad. Maybe someone else asking about his files? I heard the keyboard clicking again. Well, that is odd, Sarah murmured. What? There is a note here from last week, Tuesday. A call came in from a generic number. The caller identified himself as a consultant working with Graham. He asked for copies of the original partnership agreements from 1998. Who was the caller? I asked. He did not leave a name. He just said he was calling on behalf of the Wardridge Partnership. We told him we could not release anything without Graham's written authorization. He hung up. Wardridge Partnership. I had seen that name. In the lockbox in my memory? No. Where had I seen it? Wait, I had not seen it yet. But the name rang a bell. Sarah, I said, did the caller mention Briar Ledger Advisory? No. Sarah said, never heard of them. Natalie, what is going on? Do we need to send someone over there? No, I said quickly. No, do not do that. I am just trying to get the paperwork straight. Dad is confused, and Mom is a mess. I just wanted to check. Okay, Sarah said, sounding unconvinced. But tell Graham to call us when he is better. If people are fishing for his documents, he needs to know. He will. I said, thanks, Sarah. I hung up. Graham had not been to his lawyer in 2 years, but someone had called last week trying to get their hands on old partnership agreements. And today, there was a certificate for a fake advisory firm hanging in his office. The timeline was too perfect. Dad gets sick. He has a minor stroke 6 months ago. I remembered that now. He had called it a dizzy spell, and suddenly Briar Ledger appears. Then he collapses for real, and suddenly I am being erased from the narrative. I opened the Notes app on my phone. I created a new folder, the timeline. I typed, 6 months ago, Dad has dizzy spell. Last week, anonymous call to Hawthorne Weller asking for partnership docs. Yesterday, Dad collapses. Today, Briar Ledger certificate found. Eligibility review folder found. Sloane appoints herself repair. Derek warns me to back off. I stared at the list. It was not a series of accidents. It was a project plan. I walked back toward the room. I felt different. Walking down the hallway, I felt like I was moving through water. Everything around me, the nurses, the carts, the visitors, felt sharp and hyper-real. When I entered the room, Evan was standing by the bed, looking at Dad. Elise and Sloane were gone. "Where are they?" I asked. "Cafeteria," Evan said without looking up. Sloane needed coffee. Mom went with her. I walked over to the other side of the bed. I looked at my brother. Evan was the baby. He had always been the baby. He had soft eyes and a weak chin and a way of looking at you that made you want to fix his problems for him. I had fixed his problems for years. I had written his college essays. I had lent him money for rent 3 times last year alone. "Evan," I said. "Yeah?" "What is Briar Ledger?" He flinched. It was small. A twitch of his eyelid. A tightening of his hand on the bed rail. But I saw it. "What?" he said. "I do not know. Some investment thing Derek found." "Why?" "Derek found it?" I asked. "Or Dad found it?" "Derek," Evan said. He shrugged, trying to look casual. Dad was worried about the market. Derek said he knew these guys who were specialists. "Specialists in what?" I asked. "Mailboxes?" Evan turned to look at me. His face was pale. "What are you talking about? Nat?" "I am talking about the fact that they do not have an office. Evan, I am talking about the fact that you and Sloane and Mom are in a group chat called Wards Only that I am not in." Evan's mouth opened, then closed. He looked like a deer in headlights. "How did you—" he started, then stopped. I saw the notification. "Evan, on Mom's phone, delete the screenshots. We agreed." "Not her." Evan looked away. He ran a hand through his messy hair. "It is not what you think," he muttered. "Then tell me what it is." I said, "Tell me why I am being treated like a hostile witness in my own family." "Look, Nat," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You know how you are. You get intense. You need to control everything," Derek said. He stopped. "Derek said what?" I pressed. "Derek said you would react like this," Evan snapped. He threw his hands up. "He said you would start snooping. He said you would get paranoid and start checking up on everyone. And look, here you are, checking up on everyone." I stood very still. "I am not paranoid." "Evan," I said quietly, "I am right." Evan shook his head. "You just do not get it. This is complicated financial stuff. It is about protecting the assets. Dad is sick. If something happens to him, the estate taxes could wipe us out. Derek is trying to save the house. He is trying to save everything. And you just want to argue about rules. I want to argue about the truth." I said, "The truth is we are handling it," Evan shouted. The nurse stuck her head in the door. "Keep it down, please," she said sternly. "This is a hospital." Evan slumped against the wall, looking petulant and frightened. "Just leave it alone." "Nat," he whispered, "please, for Mom's sake, if you start a war now, you will kill her." I looked at him, my brother, the boy I had protected on the playground, the man who was now conspiring to cut me out of my own life because he was too weak to stand up to our uncle. "I am not starting a war." "Evan," I said, "I am just reading the map." I sat down in the chair Elise had vacated. I picked up a magazine and pretended to read. Evan stood there for another minute, shifting uncomfortably, before muttering something about the bathroom and bolting from the room. I waited until he was gone, then I pulled out my phone again. I had one more thing to check. Elise had said Derek was handling the fund maintenance. Evan had said Derek brought in Briar Ledger to save the house, but Hawthorne Weller had said the house deed was updated 2 years ago. I opened my email. I wanted to send a quick note to my boss, letting him know I would be out for the rest of the week. When the inbox loaded, I saw a new message. From Elise Ward to Natalie Ward. Subject, FWD, risk assessment/schedule. I frowned. Mom never emailed me. She texted or called. I opened it. The body of the email was blank, but there were 2 attachments. One was a PDF titled hospital_visitation_schedule_draft.pdf. The other was a Word document titled behavioral_risk_summary_n_ward.docx. My heart stopped. She had meant to send this to Sloan. Sloan was the scheduler. Sloan was the project manager. Mom had typed Sloan in the recipient field. And autocomplete had probably grabbed Natalie because she had emailed me a recipe last month. I tapped the second attachment, behavioral_risk_summary_n_ward. It opened in a document viewer. It looked like a corporate HR file. It had a header with the Breyer Ledger logo, a stylized tree that looked like a clip art graphic. Subject: Natalie Ward. Age: 33. Relation: daughter/secondary beneficiary. Risk profile: high summary. Subject demonstrates a pattern of emotional volatility and compulsive need for control. Documented history of anxiety-related episodes requiring medical intervention. See Appendix A. Financial assessment. Subject has a history of erratic spending disguised as generosity, often uses financial contributions to leverage emotional guilt against family members, unable to maintain consistent savings relative to income, susceptible to manipulation by external parties due to isolation. Recommendation: immediate removal from direct access to family fund principal. Transition to discretionary allowance managed by trustee. Implementation of information firewall to prevent subject from interfering with ongoing restructuring. I read it twice. Erratic spending disguised as generosity. That was the money I gave Evan. That was the tuition gap I paid for Sloan when her student loans were delayed. That was the flight I booked for Mom to visit her sister. They had taken my kindness and weaponized it. They had twisted my support into a symptom of mental illness, unable to maintain consistent savings. I had $50,000 in a high-yield savings account. I had a fully funded IRA. It was all lies, every word. But it was written in the cold, neutral language of a professional assessment. If a judge read this, if a trustee read this, they would see an unstable, controlling spinster who could not be trusted with money. I looked at the timestamp on the document metadata. It was created 3 days ago, before Dad collapsed. They had been planning this while he was still pruning the hydrangeas. I felt a wave of nausea, followed immediately by a wave of cold, crystalline clarity. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a heist. And my murder, my character murder, was the distraction they needed to pull it off. I closed the document. I saved it to my phone's local storage. Then I saved it to my Google Drive. Then I emailed it to my work address. I looked at the email from my mother again. If I exploded now, if I ran down to the cafeteria and screamed at them, I would be proving the document right. I would be the emotionally volatile daughter. I would be the risk. I took a deep breath. I smoothed the fabric of my pants. I hit reply. Hi, Mom. Thanks for sending the visitation schedule. I will take a look and let you know which shifts I can cover. I want to make sure you get enough rest. Love, Natalie. I hit send. I sat back in the chair and watched my father sleep. I was not going to scream. I was not going to cry. I was going to wait. I looked at the Breyer Ledger logo on the saved document again. Risk profile: high. They had no idea. The office of Marin Hale was located in Stonebridge, a section of D.C. where the townhouses were narrow, the bricks were historically preserved, and the hourly rates for parking could bankrupt a small family. I had taken a half-day off work, citing a migraine. It was not a lie. The pressure building behind my eyes since I read the behavioral risk summary felt like a physical clamp tightening with airway. Every hour, I sat in a leather chair that cost more than my sofa. Marin Hale sat across from me. She was a woman in her 50s with hair cut in a sharp, architectural bob and glasses that framed eyes, which had seen every possible variation of familial greed. I did not come here to sue my family. I said, my voice was steady, though my hands were cold, I just want to understand my rights. I want to know if what they are doing is standard. Marin looked at the document I had printed out, the email attachment my mother had sent by mistake. She adjusted her glasses and read it in silence. The silence stretched for 2 minutes. I watched a clock on the wall tick, tick, tick. "This is not standard," Marin said finally. She looked up. "This is a weapon." I felt a chill slide down my spine. "Explain," I said. Marin tapped the paper with a manicured fingernail. "In estate law, we talk about fitness," she said. "If a beneficiary has a drug addiction, a gambling problem, or severe mental health issues that prevent them from managing money, a trustee can invoke clauses to restrict access. It is called a spendthrift provision or a protective trust. But usually, those are private discussions. They are handled with doctors and therapists." She paused, leaning forward. "This document? This is a strategic fabrication. It uses corporate HR language to build a case for incompetence, emotional volatility, erratic spending, susceptible to manipulation. These are keywords. Natalie, they are drafting this specifically to trigger a removal clause in a trust document I suspect already exists." She looked at me with a gaze that was professional but pitying. "They are painting you as a liability," she said. "If they can prove to a trustee that giving you money would be dangerous to the fund or to yourself, they can cut you out completely, or worse, they can keep your share but put it under the control of a trustee." "Who would be the trustee?" I asked. "Usually a family member," she said, "or a close advisor." "Derek," I whispered. Marin nodded. "Likely, if this goes through, your uncle could legally control your inheritance. He could decide if you get money for a house, for a wedding, for medical bills. He would be your financial guardian, and you would be a child in the eyes of the law." I felt physically ill. The room seemed to shrink. "I am 33, I said. "I have a credit score of 800. I manage a logistics team of 40 people. Marin sighed. "The truth does not matter if the narrative is unchallenged," she said. "If they have this on file, and you do not have a counter-narrative, a corporate trustee will just look at the risk assessment and stamp denied. They do not want drama. They want liability protection." She pushed the paper back toward me. "You are a problem beneficiary. Natalie, that is what they are calling you." I looked at the document. Problem beneficiary. It felt like someone had peeled off my skin and sewn a costume onto my raw flesh. I was not a person to them anymore. I was a risk. I was a problem to be solved. "What do I do?" I asked. Marin leaned back. "You have 2 choices," she said. "You can blow this up. You can file a preemptive injunction, demand an audit, and accuse them of conspiracy. But if you do that, you prove their point. You become the volatile, litigious daughter they described in the report. And the second choice? You become a ghost." Marin said, "You smile. You nod. You play the role of the dutiful, overwhelmed daughter. And while you do that, you find the source document. You need to find the trust instrument itself. You need to find out who the trustee is, what the assets are, and exactly what powers your father signed away. You build a wall of paper so thick they cannot break through it." I stood up. I put the document back in my bag. "I can do that," I said. Marin stood and shook my hand. Her grip was firm. "Be careful." "Natalie," she said, "families are dangerous because we lower our guard around them. Do not lower your guard." I drove straight from Stonebridge to Maple Hollow. The drive took 45 minutes, and I spent every minute of it rehearsing my face in the rearview mirror. Relax the jaw, soften the eyes. Do not look like a woman who just hired a shark in a silk blouse. When I pulled into the driveway, Evan's car was there. My mother was still at the hospital with Sloan. It was just me and my brother. I unlocked the front door. The house was quiet, but I could hear the television blaring in the den. "Evan?" I called out. The TV volume dropped. Evan appeared in the hallway. He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking like he had just woken up, even though it was 3 in the afternoon. "Hey," he said. He looked wary. "Mom said you were working. I had a migraine." I said, "I left early. I thought I would stop by and grab Dad's insurance card. I know Sloan said she handled the forms, but I want to double-check the policy number against his supplemental coverage. The hospital billing department can be a nightmare if the codes do not match. It was a boring, logistical excuse. It was perfect. Evan shifted his weight. He moved slightly to the left, blocking the path to the hallway that led to the office. Sloane said she did it. He said, "You do not need to worry about it." I kept walking, closing the distance between us. "I know," I said breezily. "I just want to verify it. I have the supplemental card in my wallet. I just need to see the primary one. It is in the top drawer of his desk, right?" I took another step. Evan did not move. "You cannot go in there," he said. I stopped. "Why not?" "It is a mess," he said. The lie was so clumsy it almost made me laugh. He was reorganizing some stuff before he got sick. Papers everywhere. Derek said we should not touch anything until he can come over and sort it out. He does not want anything getting lost. Derek does not want anything getting lost, I repeated. "Yeah," Evan said, crossing his arms. "He said it is a liability thing." I looked at my brother. I looked at the way he refused to meet my eyes. Liability. That word again. "Evan," I said softly, "it is Dad's office. I am not going to lose anything. I am just looking for a card." He shook his head, a stubborn, childish gesture. "I promised Derek. Nat, just leave it." "Okay? Why do you always have to push?" "Because you are pushing me out." I thought, but I did not say it. Marin Hale's voice was in my head. "Do not prove their point." "Okay," I said. I raised my hands in surrender. "Okay, if it is a mess, I will leave it. I do not want to upset Derek." Evan's shoulders slumped in relief. "Thanks. Nat, seriously, it is just, everyone is stressed." "I know." I said, "I'm going to head out. Tell Mom I stopped by." I turned around and walked out the front door. I did not look back. Evan blocking the door was better than any document. It was confirmation. There was something in that office they were terrified I would see. And since I could not get into the office, I had to think of where else Graham Ward kept his secrets. My father was a creature of habit. He did not trust the cloud. He did not trust digital scans. He trusted paper, and he trusted redundancy. When they downsized from the big house in Potomac 5 years ago, there were boxes upon boxes of files that did not fit in the new study. Mom wanted to shred them. Dad insisted on keeping them. "You never know when the IRS will come knocking for 1999, he had joked. They rented a unit at Ridgeway Storage, a facility on the other side of town. I had helped them move. I had driven the U-Haul. I had signed the intake form because Dad had forgotten his reading glasses in the car, and Mom was complaining about the heat. I sat in my car at the end of the street and pulled out my keychain. There, on a separate ring I rarely used, was a small, square silver key. I put the car in drive. Ridgeway Storage was a fortress of corrugated metal and concrete, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. It smelled of dust and hot asphalt. I pulled up to the keypad at the main gate. I held my breath. If they had removed me from the access list, the code would not work. I punched in the 6-digit code my father had used for everything: his wedding anniversary and his jersey number from college. The keypad beeped. The light turned green. The gate groaned and slid open. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. I drove to Unit 412. It was in the back, in a row of climate-controlled units that cost $150 a month. I parked and walked to the roll-up door. I used the silver key to open the padlock. It turned with a stiff click. I rolled the door up. The smell hit me instantly. Old paper, mothballs, the faint, sweet scent of cedar. The unit was packed floor to ceiling. There were old lamps, stacks of dining chairs, boxes of holiday decorations labeled in my mother's looping cursive, and in the back, a wall of banker's boxes. I pulled the string on the single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. It cast a yellow, sickly glow over the dust motes dancing in the air. I began to dig. I moved a box labeled Xmas Ornaments 2010 and another labeled Kitchen Miscellaneous. I found the file boxes. Taxes, 1990 to 1995, Medical Records House Maintenance. I stacked them to the side, my hands getting coated in gray dust. I was looking for something specific, I did not know what it looked like, but I knew my father. He kept the important things separate. Then I saw it. Tucked behind a plastic bin of winter coats was a heavy black fireproof lockbox. It was the kind you bought at an office supply store for $50. It was locked. I did not have the key for this. I looked around the unit. I saw a rusted screwdriver sitting on a shelf next to a toolbox. I hesitated. This was breaking and entering. This was destruction of property. We agreed. Not her. I grabbed the screwdriver. I wedged the flathead into the latch of the lockbox. I leveraged my weight against it. I grunted, pushing harder, feeling the metal bite into my palm. With a loud pop, the latch gave way. I opened the lid. Inside, there were no gold bars or stacks of cash, just manila envelopes. I pulled the first one out. The paper was yellowed, the edges soft with age. The header was typed on a typewriter. Wardridge Partnership Holdings, Partnership Agreement, January 15th, 1998. Wardridge, Ward and Ridge. Derek lived on Ridgeview Lane. I scanned the document. General Partners, Graham Ward, Derek Ward. Purpose: to manage and hold family assets, including but not limited to real estate equities and venture capital interests. I flipped to the signature page. My father's signature was there. Strong and looping. Derek's was there. Sharp and angular. I opened the next envelope. These were more recent. Meeting notes. August 2024. It was a notepad page, torn from a legal pad. The handwriting was Derek's. I recognized the jagged T's and the slashed F's. Topic: distribution strategy. Goal: stabilize distributions for core family members. Challenge: dilution of assets. And then, halfway down the page, a circle. Inside the circle was my name, Natalie. Next to it, underlined twice, unpredictable/moralistic. Below that, need to isolate from decision matrix. Will oppose aggressive leveraging. I stared at the words, moralistic, because I paid my bills, because I did not cheat on my taxes, because I believed in fairness. Aggressive leveraging, that was what they were doing. They were leveraging the fund, using it for something risky, and they knew I would stop them. I sat down on a box of old textbooks. The concrete floor was cold through my jeans. I thought about the money I had lent Evan last year, $2,000 for car repairs. He had sworn he would pay me back in a month. He never did. I never asked for it. I thought about the time Sloan called me crying because her credit card was maxed out and she needed a deposit for a venue for her engagement party, an engagement that ended 3 months later. I wired her $1,500. She called me an angel. Now, in Derek's handwriting, that generosity was reframed, unpredictable. They did not hate me because I was bad with money. They feared me because I was good with it. I was the one person who would look at the ledger and ask where the numbers went. I dug deeper into the box. I found a letter from 3 years ago. It was addressed to Graham Ward, from a man named Thomas Greer at Crescent Vale Trust Company. Dear Graham, per our conversation regarding the restructuring of the Wardridge assets into the new Ward Family Fund, we have prepared the draft trust instruments. Please note the specific language regarding beneficiary fitness as requested by Derek. Requested by Derek. My father had not requested the fitness clause. Derek had. I took out my phone. I photographed every page, the partnership agreement, the meeting notes, the letter from Crescent Vale. I put the documents back in the lockbox. I could not lock it again, so I shoved it deep behind the winter coats and piled the heavy boxes of tax returns in front of it. I closed the storage unit and locked it. I sat in my car, my hands covered in dust, and cried. I did not cry for the money. I cried because for my entire adult life, I had thought my family saw me as the boring, reliable safety net. I was wrong. They saw me as the police, and they were criminals. I needed to talk to someone who knew the history, someone who was not in the chat. I drove to a diner in Silver Creek, a 20-minute drive away. I ordered a coffee and dialed a number I had not called in years. Mara Denson. Mara was my father's old business partner from his real estate days, before he retired. She was a woman who drank scotch neat and smoked cigars and had never had children because she said she preferred dogs and contracts. She answered on the second ring. "Natalie Ward," she rasped. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Hi, Mara," I said. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, not at all. I heard about Graham. How is the old goat?" "He is stable," I said, recovering. "Good. He is too stubborn to die." "Mara," I said, "I need to ask you something. About the old days. About the partnership with Derek." There was a pause. The line crackled. "What about it?" she asked, her voice dropping an octave. "I found some papers," I said, referencing a Wardridge partnership and a fitness clause in a trust. Mara let out a low whistle. "You are digging in the graveyard." "Kid, tell me," I said. "Please, look." Mara said, "Graham loved Derek. He always felt guilty that he was the successful one and Derek was the hustler. Derek always had schemes. Some worked, most did not. Graham bailed him out more times than I can count. So the partnership? It was Graham's way of giving Derek a salary without calling it charity." Mara said, "He put assets into the partnership so Derek could manage them and take a fee. It was supposed to be a retirement vehicle for the whole family, but Derek treated it like his personal lever." She said, "He was always trying to borrow against the assets to fund some new venture. Graham hated it. He hated the risk, but he hated conflict more. Every time Derek pushed, Graham folded, he would sign the amendment, approve the loan, just to keep the peace at Sunday dinner. And me?" I asked. "Where do I fit in?" Mara sighed. "You are Graham, Natalie. You are the only one of those kids who actually has his head for numbers, and Derek knows it. Graham used to tell me, Natalie is the only one who could run this thing properly. But Derek would never let a woman, let alone his niece, tell him what to do." I closed my eyes. "So Derek cut me out," I said, "to protect his playground. He probably convinced Graham it was for your own good." Mara said, "Told him you were too stressed, too anxious. Graham buys whatever Derek sells him because he wants to believe his brother is looking out for him." "Thank you." "Mara," I said, "watch your back." "Kid," she said, "Derek looks like a golden retriever, but he bites like a wolf." I hung up. I had the history. Now I needed the present. I looked at the photo of the letter from Crescent Vale Trust Company. There was a phone number at the bottom of the letterhead. It was 5:15 in the afternoon. They might be closed. I dialed the number. "Crescent Vale Trust. This is Arthur speaking." The voice was smooth, cultured, and indifferent. "Hello," I said. "My name is Natalie Ward. I am calling regarding the Ward Family Fund." "One moment. Ms. Ward, let me pull up the file." I heard typing. "I see the file here." Arthur said, "How can I assist you?" "I would like to request a copy of the current trust instrument." I said, "and a statement of assets for the last 12 months. There was a silence, a long professional silence. "I apologize." "Ms. Ward," Arthur said, "but I cannot release that information to you. I am Graham Ward's daughter." I said, "I am a beneficiary. According to our current records, beneficiary discussions require authorized access." Arthur said, "Your name is not on the authorized list for administrative requests." "Who is on the list?" I asked. "I cannot disclose that information to a non-authorized party. Is Derek Ward on the list?" "I cannot confirm or deny that." "Is Sloan Ward on the list?" "Ms. Ward," Arthur said, his voice hardening slightly. "If you believe there is an error, you will need to submit a formal request in writing to the primary trustee." "Who is the primary trustee?" "Crescent Vale serves as the corporate trustee, but we act on the instructions of the appointed family protector." "The family protector," that was the legal term. "Let me guess." I said, "The family protector is Derek Ward." Arthur did not answer. "Ms. Ward, is there anything else I can help you with?" "No," I said. "You have been very helpful." I hung up. I sat in the diner booth as the waitress poured me a refill of coffee I did not want. I was locked out. The house, the office, the trust company. They had built a fortress around my father's money. and they were standing on the battlements pouring boiling oil on anyone who tried to get in. But they had made a mistake. They thought I was just a daughter. They thought I was unpredictable. They thought I was emotional. I took a sip of the bitter coffee. I pulled out my notebook. I turned to a fresh page. Goal: become impossible to erase. I wrote down a list. 1. Digitize all documents from the storage unit. 2. Find the family protector appointment document. 3. Record every conversation. 4. Be the perfect daughter. I would go back to the hospital tonight. I would bring fresh flowers. I would hold my father's hand. I would smile at Sloane and ask her how her day was. I would thank Derek for handling the paperwork. I would let them think they had won. I would let them think the risk summary was accurate, that I was too fragile to fight. And while they slept, I would take their fortress apart, brick by brick. I paid for my coffee with cash. I tipped 20%. I walked out to my car. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the parking lot. I was not Natalie Ward, the victim. I was Natalie Ward, the auditor. And the audit had just begun. The beep of the cardiac monitor had become the soundtrack of my life. It was a rhythmic, artificial metronome that measured out the seconds of my father's existence. I sat in the stiff vinyl chair next to his bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest. It was 3 a.m. The hospital was in that strange, suspended state between the chaos of the night shift and the bustle of the morning rounds. Elise was asleep on the cot the nurses had brought in. Her breathing was soft and shallow, a stark contrast to the mechanical hiss of the oxygen machine aiding my father. I was the only one awake. I was the watchman. I looked at Graham Ward, my father, the man who had taught me how to balance a checkbook when I was 10, the man who had insisted on buying me a sensible sedan with high safety ratings instead of the convertible I wanted for my 16th birthday. He looked fragile now, his skin the color of parchment, his hands resting limp on the white sheets. Suddenly, the rhythm of his breathing changed. It hitched. I leaned forward. "Dad?" I whispered. His eyelids fluttered. They were heavy, weighed down by sedation and exhaustion. But they opened. His eyes, usually a sharp, piercing blue, were cloudy. He looked at the ceiling, then at the IV pole, and finally, his gaze drifted to me. There was a moment of recognition. It was faint, like a light flickering in a storm, but it was there. "Natalie," he rasped. His voice was barely a sound. It was just air shaping itself into my name. "I am here, Dad," I said. I took his hand. It was cold. "I am right here." He squeezed my fingers. It was a weak grip, but it was deliberate. He tried to lift his head, but the effort was too much. He settled back against the pillow, his eyes locking onto mine with a sudden, desperate intensity. "Do not let them rush you," he whispered. I froze. "Rush me? Rush me into what?" "Dad," I said, leaning closer. "What do you mean? Who is rushing me?" He swallowed, his throat clicking dryly. "The papers," he breathed. "The amendments. Do not—" His eyes rolled back slightly, losing focus. The monitor beeped a little faster, then settled back into its slow rhythm. His grip on my hand loosened. He was gone again, drifting back into the chemical fog. I sat there, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Do not let them rush you." It was ambiguous. It could have been the confusion of a stroke victim. He could be remembering a business deal from 20 years ago. He could be talking about traffic, but I knew he was not. Graham Ward did not waste words, even in delirium. He was trying to give me an instruction. The papers, the amendments. "Natalie?" I jumped. My mother was sitting up on the cot, rubbing her eyes. Her hair was mussed, her face creased with sleep. "Did he say something?" Elise asked. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had emailed a risk assessment calling me unstable to my sister. He woke up for a second. I said carefully. He squeezed my hand. "What did he say?" She was wide awake now. Her gaze darted to the bedside table, where a stack of manila folders sat next to her water cup. He said not to let them rush me. I said, Elise paused. A shadow passed over her face. Calculation masked as concern. She stood up and walked over to the bed, smoothing the blanket over my father's chest. Oh, the poor dear. She sighed. He is so confused. He probably thinks we are still trying to get to the airport for that trip we missed in 1999. He always hated being rushed to the gate. It was a smooth lie, a pivot. She was rewriting the moment in real time. He mentioned amendments. Mom, I said. He said, do not let them rush you on the amendments. Elise stiffened. She turned to me, offering a tired, indulgent smile. Natalie, honey, he is on heavy medication. He does not know what year it is. You should not read into it. You know how you get. You obsess over details until you work yourself into a state. You know how you get. The phrase landed like a slap. It was the verbal equivalent of the risk summary I had found in her email. I am not working myself into a state. I said, I am just telling you what he said. Elise sighed. She reached over to the bedside table and picked up the top folder. Well, actually, it is funny you mention paperwork, she said. Since we are both awake, and since Graham is clearly thinking about getting things in order, there is something small I need you to sign. She held out a document. It was a single page. What is this? I asked. It is just a temporary consent form, she said casually. Derek sent it over. It basically just says that for the duration of Dad's hospital stay, you are waiving the requirement to be copied on every single administrative update. It is for simplicity, really, so we do not have to chase you down for signatures on insurance coding or facility transfers. You know how busy you are with work. I took the paper. Waiver of procedural notice and consent to temporary delegated authority. I scanned the text. It was dense. The undersigned beneficiary hereby waives the right to receive notice of administrative actions. Consents to the appointment of a designate for all decisions regarding the Ward Family Fund assets for a period of 90 days. It was not about insurance coding. It was a blank check. If I signed this, I was giving them permission to move money, change trustees, and rewrite the rules without even telling me. I looked up at my mother. She was watching me, her expression expectant. I cannot sign this now. Mom, I said. Why not? She asked. Her smile faltered. Because it is 3 a.m, I said, and because I do not sign legal documents without reading them thoroughly. Natalie, please, she said, her voice taking on that familiar, pleading whine. Do not be difficult. Derek needs this by morning to process the rehab facility transfer. If you do not sign it, Dad might lose his spot at the recovery center. That was a lie. Rehab facilities did not care about family fund waivers. They cared about insurance cards. I will read it over breakfast, I said. I folded the paper and put it in my purse. Natalie, Elise snapped. It was sharp, sudden. Give that back. If you are not going to sign it, leave it here. I stood up. I slung my purse over my shoulder. I'm going to get some coffee, I said. I will be back in an hour. I walked out of the room. My legs were shaking, but I forced myself to move with a steady, purposeful stride. I made it halfway down the corridor before I heard the click of heels behind me. Natalie. It was Sloane. She must have been in the waiting room down the hall. I stopped and turned. My sister looked impeccable, even at 3:30 a.m. She was wearing fresh makeup. Where are you going? She asked. Her voice was low, tight with suppressed anger. To the cafeteria. I said, Mom texted me. Sloane said, she said you took a document. I took a form she asked me to sign. I corrected, I am going to read it. Sloane stepped closer. She was taller than me, and she used it. She loomed. Why are you making this harder? She hissed. I looked at her. Harder? I asked. Yes, harder, she whispered furiously. We are in a crisis. Dad is lying there helpless. Mom is falling apart. And here you are, playing lawyer, questioning everything, stealing files. Do you have any idea how selfish you look? Selfish? I was the one who drove alone. I was the one paying my own bills. I was the one who had not asked for a dime in 10 years. I am not making it harder. Sloan, I said calmly, I am making it accurate. Sloan stared at me. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. Accurate, she repeated. The word sounded foreign in her mouth. Yes, I said. Dad told me not to let anyone rush me. Mom tried to rush me. I am listening to Dad. He is delirious, Sloan snapped. Maybe, I said, or maybe he is the only one who is making sense. I turned and walked away. Sloan did not follow me. She stood there in the fluorescent hallway. A statue of indignation. Why are you making this harder? Because in the Ward family, easy meant silent, and I was done being silent. I did not go to the cafeteria. I went to my car. I needed to be alone. I needed to breathe air that did not smell of antiseptic and lies. I sat in the driver's seat of my sedan, locked the doors, and leaned my head back against the headrest. The parking garage was silent. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Expecting a text from Elise demanding I return the paper, it was an email. The sender was truthteller88@genericmail.com, a burner address. Subject: You need to see this. My thumb hovered over the screen. Marin Hale's warning echoed in my head. Families are dangerous. I opened the email. There was no body text, just an image. It was a screenshot. It was from a group chat. The background was the default gray. The participants were listed at the top: Derek, Elise, Sloan, Evan. The timestamp on the messages was from 2 days ago. Derek: Is the risk summary done? We need it for the Crescent Vale file. Sloan: Briar Ledger sent the draft. I tweaked the language about her anxiety, made it sound more clinical. Evan: Are we sure about this? She's going to freak out if she finds out. Derek: She won't find out until it is too late. We have to freeze Natalie out before Graham wakes up enough to ask for the ledger. If she gets access, she will block the leverage play. Elise: I just want this over with. I hate lying to her. Derek: We are not lying. Elise: We are protecting the future. Push the eligibility review. Get her to sign the waiver. Once she is designated as unfit, we can move the assets without her signature. I stared at the tiny screen. Freeze Natalie out. Designated as unfit. Leverage play. It was all there, written in black and white pixels. My own mother saying she hated lying, but doing it anyway. My sister bragging about tweaking the language of my mental health history. My uncle orchestrating the entire coup. And Evan: Are we sure about this? He was the weak link. He was the one questioning it, not because he was moral, but because he was afraid. She is going to freak out. I looked at the sender address again. Truthteller88. Who sent this? It could not be Derek or Sloan. They were the architects. It could not be Elise. She was too terrified of Derek to betray him. That left Evan, or maybe a disgruntled employee at Briar Ledger. No, that was unlikely. The chat was Ward's only. It had to be Evan. He was the one who had blocked the door to the office. He was the one who had looked sick when I asked him about the fund. He was sending me a life raft, but he was too cowardly to put his name on it. I saved the image. I forwarded it to Marin Hale. Then I started the car. I was not going back to the hospital yet. I needed to find my brother. I found him an hour later. He was not at the hospital. He was sitting in his car in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner 3 miles down the road. I knew he went there when he was stressed. We used to go there in high school after bad breakups. I pulled up next to his beat-up SUV. He was staring at his phone, the blue light illuminating his face. I tapped on his window. He jumped, dropping his phone. When he saw it was me, he looked like he wanted to start the engine and drive away, but he didn't. He rolled down the window. Nat, he said, what are you doing here? I got the email. Evan, I said. He froze. What email? The screenshot. I said, the one showing Sloan bragging about tweaking my risk assessment. The one showing Derek talking about freezing me out. Evan swallowed. His Adam's apple bobbed nervously. I do not know what you are talking about. I leaned down, resting my arms on his doorframe. Stop it, Evan. I know it was you. You are the only one in that chat with a conscience, even if it is a small one. He looked down at his lap. He picked at a loose thread on his jeans. They are going to ruin me. Nat, he whispered. Who? Derek. And the guys he works with. I opened his car door. Move over, I said. He shifted to the passenger seat. I sat in the driver's seat. It smelled of stale fries and fear. Talk to me. Evan, I said. Tell me what is really going on. Why are you helping them destroy me? Evan put his head in his hands. I owe Derek money, he said. How much? He fronted me $50,000 last year, Evan said, his voice muffled by his palms. For a business idea, a crypto thing, it went to zero. Nat, I lost it all in 2 weeks, $50,000. And he has held it over you? I asked. He has a promissory note, Evan said. He said if I help him with the fund restructuring, he will tear it up. He will forgive the debt. But if I do not, he said he will sue me. He said he will garnish my wages for the rest of my life. I looked at my brother. He was 28 years old, and he was drowning. So the price of your freedom is my reputation. I said, you are selling me out for 50 grand. It is not just that, Evan cried. Looking up, his eyes were wet. It is the house, Nat. Derek says Dad made bad investments years ago. He says the fund is illiquid. He says if we do not leverage the assets now, if we do not move them into this new structure, we will lose everything. The house in Maple Hollow, the beach condo, Mom's pension. He grabbed my arm. He says you would stop it. Nat, he says you are too risk-averse. He says you would demand an audit and freeze everything. And while the lawyers fought, the banks would foreclose. He convinced us that cutting you out was the only way to save Mom. I looked at his hand on my arm. I gently removed it. Evan, I said softly, Derek is lying to you. No. He showed me the numbers. He showed you his numbers. I said, he showed you papers from Briar Ledger, a company that operates out of a mailbox in Virginia. Evan blinked. A mailbox? I drove there. Evan, it is a shipping center next to a vape shop. There is no firm. There is no advisory board. It is just Derek. Evan's face went white. But the website. It is a template. I said, a cheap one. I turned in the seat to face him fully. Listen to me. Derek is not trying to save the house. He is trying to steal it. He is using the fund as his personal piggy bank. He has probably drained the liquidity already, and now he needs to mortgage the properties to cover his tracks. That is why he needs to leverage the assets. He is cashing out before Dad dies. Evan stared at me. The horror was slowly dawning on him. And you? He whispered. You are the obstacle. I am the only one who can do the math. I said. Evan slumped back against the seat. Oh my God, he said. I signed the consent form. I signed it yesterday. I felt a cold knot in my stomach. You gave him your proxy? Yeah. He said everyone was doing it. I took a deep breath. Okay, I said. That is done. We cannot undo it yet, but you can help me fix it. How? He asked. If he knows I talked to you, he will call the loan. He will not call the loan, I said. Because if he sues you, he has to go to court. And if he goes to court, I will be there asking where the $50,000 came from, if it came from the family fund without authorization. That is embezzlement. He is more afraid of exposure than he is of losing 50 grand. Evan looked at me. For the first time, he did not look like the baby brother. He looked like a man realizing he had been played. What do you need me to do? He asked. Nothing yet. I said, just go back to the hospital. Act normal. Do not tell Sloan or Mom we talked. And if Derek asks, tell him I am crumbling. Tell him I am crying in my car. Tell him I am ready to break. Evan nodded slowly. I can do that, he said. Good, I said. I opened the door and stepped out. I am going to get my own car. I said, go back to being the quiet one, Evan, but keep your eyes open. The next morning, I walked into the offices of Hawthorne Weller. I did not have an appointment. The receptionist, a young woman I did not recognize, tried to stop me. Mr. Weller's schedule is full today, she said, guarding the hallway like a sentry. I am not leaving until I see him. I said, I sat down in the waiting area. I crossed my legs. I pulled out a book. I waited for 3 hours. At noon, Mr. Weller walked out of his office, heading for lunch. He was a tall man with white hair and a bow tie, a relic of a different era of law. Natalie, he said, stopping in his tracks. Good heavens, Sarah told me about your father. I'm so sorry. I stood up. I need 5 minutes. Mr. Weller, please, it is about the integrity of the estate. He looked at my face. He saw the dark circles under my eyes, but he also saw the set of my jaw. Come in, he said. We sat in his office. It smelled of old books and pipe tobacco. I told him everything, the group chat, the risk summary, the fake firm, the pressure to sign the waiver. He listened without interrupting. He tented his fingers. And you say there is an amendment? He asked. My father mentioned it in a moment of lucidity. I said, and I found a draft in a lockbox referencing a Fourth Amendment to the partnership. Mr. Weller frowned. There is no Fourth Amendment, he said. The Third Amendment was signed in 2010. That was the last change. Then someone is drafting one. I said, and they are trying to backdate it, or force it through while he is incapacitated. Mr. Weller pressed a button on his intercom. Sarah, can you bring in the call log from last week? Sarah entered a moment later with a printout. Mr. Weller scanned it. Here it is, he said. The call I told Sarah about, the man asking for the partnership deeds. He looked up at me. We traced the number. Natalie. It was a burner cell, but the caller ID spoofed a local area code. Who? We do not know, but the caller tried to answer the security questions to gain access to the file, and he failed. Mr. Weller said, he knew your father's social. He knew his mother's maiden name, but he missed the challenge question. What was the question? I asked. What is the name of your first dog? I smiled. It was a sad, tight smile. Barnaby. I said, Mr. Weller nodded. Correct. The caller said Rover. It was such a generic guess. It was pathetic. Natalie. Mr. Weller said, leaning forward. This is serious. Attempting to access client files through impersonation is fraud. If they are trying to amend the trust to exclude you, and they are basing it on false claims of your incompetence, that is actionable. I know. I said, but I need proof. I need the documents they are circulating. I can draft a formal demand letter to the trustee. Mr. Weller said, if Crescent Vale is the custodian, they have a fiduciary duty to all beneficiaries. If I put them on notice that there is a dispute regarding the mental capacity of the grantor, your father, they will have to freeze all activity. Freeze it, I said, yes. No distributions, no amendments, no changes until a court reviews the situation. Do it, I said. It will start a war. Natalie, he warned, once I send this letter, your family will know you have legal counsel. They will know you are not just the difficult daughter. They will know you are a litigant. Let them know. I said, I left the office feeling lighter. I had an ally, a real one. My phone rang as I walked to the parking garage. It was Derek. Natalie, he said. His voice was warm, dripping with that syrupy concern he used on widows and grandmothers. Hello, Uncle Derek. I heard you were at the hospital late last night. He said, Sloan said you seemed upset. I am tired. Derek. I said, I am just tired. I know. Honey, I know. Look, I have been thinking. This is too much for you. The stress, the hospital, the financial complexity. It is not fair to put this on your shoulders. He paused. I waited. I want to make you an offer, he said. A way to give you some space. To let you step back and focus on your health. My health. There it was again. What kind of offer? The family is willing to buy out your future interest in the fund. He said, right now, cash. So you do not have to wait for probate. You do not have to deal with the messy fluctuations of the market. You can just walk away. Be free. How much? I asked. $200,000, he said. He said it like he was handing me the crown jewels. 200,000. If the fund was worth what I thought it was, based on the real estate values in Maryland alone, my share should be closer to 2 million. He was offering me 10 cents on the dollar to disappear. That is a lot of money, I said, keeping my voice flat. It is, he said. It is enough to pay off your mortgage. Take a nice trip. Get some therapy if you need it. We just want you to be happy. Natalie, we want to take care of you. I gripped the phone tight. I will think about it. Derek, I said. Do not think too long, he said. The offer is time-sensitive. We need to finalize the structure before the end of the month. I hung up. I sat in my car. $200,000. It was a bribe, but it was also a tell. You do not offer a problem beneficiary $200,000 unless you are terrified of what they might find. My phone chimed with a text message. It was from Aunt Marge, my father's cousin in Florida. Hi, Natalie. Just heard from Elise that you are having a hard time coping with Graham's illness. Sending prayers. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Mental health is so important. Then another text. From my cousin Brad. Hey, Nat. Heard you're struggling. Hang in there. Let the family handle the heavy stuff, okay? Then another. They had started the campaign. They were calling everyone. They were planting the seeds. Natalie is cracking up. Natalie is unstable. Natalie needs to be managed. I looked at the messages. Narrative campaign. Marin Hale had predicted it. They were trying to isolate me. They wanted me to feel surrounded, judged, and broken. I typed a reply to Aunt Marge. Thanks, Aunt Marge. I am doing fine. Just focused on making sure Dad gets the best care and that his wishes are followed accurately. Hope you are well. I hit send. I started the car. They wanted a narrative? I would give them a narrative. I drove toward the hospital. I stopped at a florist and bought a massive bouquet of hydrangeas, Dad's favorite. I walked into the hospital room 20 minutes later. Elise was there. Sloan was there. Derek was there. They all stopped talking when I walked in. I smiled. It was the brightest, warmest smile I had ever worn. Hi, everyone, I said, breezing past them to set the flowers on the windowsill. Natalie, Derek said, looking surprised. You seem chipper. I am. I said, I had a great meeting today. Oh? Elise asked. With work? No. I said. I turned to face them. With Mr. Weller? The room went deadly silent. Derek's smile froze. Mr. Weller? He repeated. Yes, I said, Dad's attorney. We had a long talk about the fund, and the impersonation attempt, and the importance of freezing all assets until Dad recovers. I saw the color drain from Sloane's face. I saw Derek's eyes narrow into slits. I walked over to the bed and took my father's hand. Mr. Weller is sending over a letter to Crescent Vale today. I said cheerfully, so we do not have to worry about any paperwork anymore. It is all being handled by the lawyers. Now we can just focus on being a family. I looked at Derek. Isn't that a relief? Uncle Derek? He looked at me. For a second, the mask slipped, and I saw pure, unadulterated hatred. But I did not flinch. I squeezed my father's hand, and I settled into the chair. I was not going anywhere. My apartment in Brackenridge was silent. Save for the hum of my refrigerator and the frantic clicking of my mouse, it was 2 a.m. I had not slept since the confrontation at the hospital. Instead, I had come home, poured a glass of water I forgot to drink, and uploaded every photo I had taken in the storage unit to a secure, encrypted cloud server. Now, I was processing the data. I had created a spreadsheet, my comfort zone, and was meticulously entering every transaction I found in the photographed statements. Date, amount, recipient, memo. I was looking for patterns. I was looking for the leak. I found it in row 412. It was a transfer from the Wardridge Partnership operating account. The date was July 15th of last year. Payee, Briar Ledger Advisory. Amount, $12,500. Memo, Strategic Consulting/Retainer. I frowned. July 15th. I scrolled down. August 15th. Another transfer to Briar Ledger. Same amount. September 15th, October, November, December, January. In 6 months, nearly $90,000 had been siphoned out of the partnership and sent to the mailbox in Virginia. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the dates. July 15th. I closed my eyes, forcing my memory to rewind. What happened in July? It was summer. It was hot. I had gone to Ocean City for a weekend with friends. When I came back, Mom told me Dad had suffered a dizzy spell while gardening. She said he was dehydrated. She said he rested for a few days and was fine. I opened my calendar app and scrolled back to July. July 14th. Call Mom. Dad not feeling well. Vertigo? The transfer started the day after he got sick. The picture snapped into focus with terrifying clarity. My father had a minor stroke or a TIA in July. He was weak. He was frightened. And Derek, the loving brother, had stepped in to help. He had probably told Graham that the dizziness was a sign he needed to slow down, that the complexity of the fund was too much for him, that he needed professional management to secure the legacy. So Graham, trusting and vulnerable, had signed a consulting agreement. Or maybe he had not signed it. Maybe Derek had just used his existing authority to set up the autopay. This was not just about cutting me out. This was about covering tracks. If I remained a beneficiary, I would eventually see the books. I would see $90,000 paid to a fake company. I would ask for the consulting reports. I would ask to meet the advisors. And when I did, Derek's house of cards would collapse. He did not hate me. He feared me. I was the auditor he could not bribe. The next morning, the hospital room felt like a courtroom before the judge arrives. The air was heavy and still. My father was sleeping, his chest rising and falling in that rhythmic, monitored cadence that had become the metronome of our lives. Elise was sitting by the window, staring out at the parking lot. She looked smaller today. The defiance from yesterday, the performative anger, had evaporated, leaving behind a fragile, trembling exhaustion. I walked in and set my purse on the chair. "Good morning, Mom." She turned. Her eyes were red. She did not smile. "Natalie," she said. Her voice was a whisper. "Where are the others?" I asked. "Derek is meeting with the discharge planners," she said. "Sloan is getting coffee." I nodded. I walked over to the bed and checked Dad's chart. His vitals were stable. "Natalie," Elise said again. I turned to look at her. "Please," she said. "Please what? Please stop this. With the lawyers? With Mr. Weller?" I sighed. I walked over and sat on the edge of the radiator cover next to her. "Mom," I said gently, "I am protecting him. Someone tried to impersonate him. Someone is moving money to a fake company. Do you know about Briar Ledger? Do you know they are taking $12,000 a month?" Elise flinched. She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. "I know Derek hired help," she murmured. "He did not hire help. Mom, he hired himself. He is paying himself to rob us." Elise squeezed her eyes shut. "You do not understand," she whispered. "What do I not understand? That he is stealing? You do not understand what he has done for us," she hissed. Opening her eyes, they were wet with tears. She grabbed my hand. Her grip was desperate. "Your father is a good man, Natalie, but he is not a businessman. Not really. He made money in real estate because the market boomed, not because he was a genius. But then the crash happened. We were underwater. We were going to lose the house. We were going to lose everything." I stared at her. I had never heard this. "When?" I asked. 2008, she said, and again in 2012. We were drowning. Derek fixed it. He moved money around. He borrowed from Peter to pay Paul. He dealt with the banks. He saved us. Natalie, he saved our dignity. So we owe him? I asked. We owe him our silence while he loots the estate? He is not looting it, Elise cried softly. He is managing the debt. He says the structure is fragile. He says if we let outsiders look too closely, if we let lawyers like Mr. Weller start digging, the banks might call the loans. He says we could lose the house in Maple Hollow. She looked at me, her face crumbling. I cannot lose that house, Natalie. It is my life. It is where I raised you. If Derek says we need to tighten the circle to survive, I believe him, because the alternative is admitting that we are broke. I looked at my mother. I saw the terror in her eyes. It was not malice. It was not greed. It was a deep, paralyzing fear of poverty. She was a woman who had defined herself by her stability, and she would believe any lie that promised to keep the facade intact. Derek knew that. He was holding the house hostage. Mom, I said softly, we are not broke. The real estate market is at an all-time high. If we sold everything today, we would be fine. Derek is lying to keep you afraid. He is the one making it fragile. No. She shook her head. Pulling her hand away, you do not know. You think everything is a spreadsheet. You think it is black and white. It is not. It is gray. And Derek navigates the gray. She turned back to the window. Just stop. Natalie, please, before you break something you cannot fix. I stood up. I am not the one breaking things. Mom, I said, I am the one trying to put the pieces back together before Derek steals them all. I found Sloane in the hospital cafeteria. She was sitting at a small round table, picking at a dry muffin. Her phone was face down on the table, a rare occurrence. I bought a black coffee and sat down opposite her. She looked up. Her expression hardened instantly. I do not want to talk to you, she said. We need to talk. Sloane, I have nothing to say to you. You made your point yesterday. You brought in the big guns. Congratulations. I took a sip of coffee. Do you remember when you were 24? I asked. Sloane rolled her eyes. Oh God. Here we go. The history lesson. You had just finished your master's degree, I continued, ignoring her tone. And you got that unpaid internship in New York, the dream job, but you could not afford the rent on the studio in Brooklyn. Dad said he couldn't help because cash flow was tight. Sloane stared at me. Her jaw set. You called me. I said, you were crying. You said you were going to have to turn it down and move back to Maple Hollow. So? Sloane snapped. So I wired you $3,000. I said, it was my entire savings at the time. I ate ramen for 3 months so you could take that internship. Sloane let out a short, bitter laugh. I knew you would bring that up eventually. She said, I am not bringing it up to collect. Sloane, I am bringing it up because I want you to remember who I am. I am the sister who starved so you could chase your dream. I am not the enemy. I am not unstable. I am the one who catches you when you fall. Sloane leaned forward. Her eyes were cold. You think that was kindness? She asked. It was kindness. I said, no. She shook her head. It was power. You loved it. You loved being the savior. You loved being the sensible little sister bailing out the disastrous big sister. You have held that money over my head for 9 years. Every time you look at me, I see you counting it. I recoiled. I never mentioned it. I said, not once. You did not have to, Sloane cried, her voice rising. It is in your attitude. It is in the way you judge my clothes, my car, my job. You think you are better than us because you save and we spend. You think you are the only adult in the room. She stood up. Grabbing her purse, you do not give gifts. Natalie, she spat. You buy leverage, and I am sick of being in your debt. That is why I signed the waiver. That is why I agreed to the review. Because I would rather be broke than owe you another damn thing. She stormed out of the cafeteria, her heels clacking against the tile. I sat there, stunned. My generosity, my sacrifice. She had twisted it into a weapon. You always keep score. I realized then that there was no cracking her conscience. Her conscience was already broken, reshaped by a decade of resentment I had not even known existed. Derek did not have to work hard to turn her against me. He just had to hand her a mirror that showed her what she wanted to see, a victim fighting back against a tyrant. And I was the tyrant. When I got home that evening, the certified letter was waiting in my mailbox. The envelope was thick. The return address was Crescent Vale Trust Company. I carried it upstairs. I sat on my sofa, I opened it with a letter opener, slicing through the paper with a clean, sharp sound. Dear Ms. Ward, Re. Notice of Beneficiary Suitability Review. This letter is to inform you that the trustee of the Ward Family Fund has received formal notification regarding concerns about your suitability as a direct beneficiary. These concerns, documented in the attached beneficiary risk summary, cite potential financial instability, emotional volatility, and a risk of litigious interference under Article 6 of the Trust Instrument, as amended. The trustee is obligated to investigate such claims to protect the corpus of the trust for all beneficiaries. You are hereby invited to submit a written response to these claims within 5 business days. Failure to respond will result in a default judgment, which may lead to the suspension of your direct beneficiary status and the appointment of a discretionary trustee to manage your interest. Sincerely, Arthur P., Sterling Senior Trust Officer. I read it twice. It was happening. They were not waiting. They were moving to disqualify me before I could freeze the assets. 5 days. They wanted me to panic. They wanted me to write an emotional, rambling letter screaming about how unfair this was. They wanted me to sound crazy. I put the letter on the coffee table. I walked to my desk. I opened my laptop. I did not panic. I went to work. I drafted a response. Dear Mr. Sterling, I am in receipt of your letter dated January 27th regarding the Beneficiary Suitability Review. Please find attached the following evidence which refutes the claims in the risk summary and demonstrates that the summary itself is a fraudulent document created to facilitate embezzlement. Exhibit A, my credit report, dated today, score 815, 0 delinquent accounts. Exhibit B, my employment verification and salary history for the last 7 years. Exhibit C, a sworn timeline of events, documenting that the risk summary was created by Breyer Ledger Advisory 3 days prior to my father's incapacitation. Exhibit D, a photograph of the registered address of Breyer Ledger Advisory, showing it to be a mailbox rental service in a strip mall. Exhibit E, a copy of the email metadata showing the risk summary was circulated among family members with intent to freeze me out. Furthermore, I am formally requesting copies of all communications between Crescent Vale Trust Company and Derek Ward, Breyer Ledger Advisory, or any party claiming to represent Graham Ward. For the past 12 months, be advised that my legal counsel, Hawthorne Weller, LLP, has already issued a freeze notice. Any action taken to alter my beneficiary status during this period of dispute will be considered a breach of fiduciary duty and will be met with immediate litigation against Crescent Vale Trust Company, personally and professionally. Sincerely, Natalie Ward. I printed it, I signed it, I scanned it, I emailed it to Arthur Sterling. Then I put the physical copy in an envelope to be sent via overnight courier. It was surgical. It was cold. It was the most aggressive thing I had ever written. I felt a strange, vibrating calm. I was not the victim anymore. I was the storm. At 11:30 that night, there was a knock on my door. I jumped. I was not expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. It was Evan. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot. His hair matted. He was wearing the same clothes he had been wearing yesterday. I unlocked the door. Evan? He walked in past me, almost stumbling. He went straight to the sofa and sat down, putting his head in his hands. I closed the door and locked it. What happened? I asked. Derek knows. He mumbled into his hands. Knows what? He knows I talked to you. He saw the text I sent you, the one about the meeting. I did not get a text from you about a meeting. I said, I sent it to the wrong number. Evan groaned. I was panicking. I tried to delete it, but he saw me fumbling with the phone. He grabbed it. I stood there, looking at my brother. He was a disaster. And? I asked. He told me to get out. Evan said, he said if I'm going to be a traitor, I can go sleep in the street. He said he is calling the loan tomorrow. He looked up at me. He looked like a child who had broken a window. I am sorry. Nat, I am so sorry. I looked at him. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him that this was his fault, that his weakness had caused this entire mess. I wanted to tell him that selling me out for $50,000 was unforgivable, but I saw the fear in his eyes. It was the same fear I had seen in Mom's eyes, the fear of ruin, the fear of being small. Derek had broken him long ago. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. I brought it to him. "Drink this," I said. He took it, his hands shaking. "Did you see the risk summary being written?" I asked quietly. He nodded, gulping the water. "Yeah, I was in the room." Derek was on speakerphone with the guy from Briar Ledger. He was dictating the points. Make her sound unstable. Say she spends erratically. He was laughing. "Nat," he said, "it was easy. He said you were so predictable that all they had to do was push a few buttons and you would explode." "And the debt?" I asked. "The 50,000? "He promised to wipe it," Evan whispered. "He said if I signed the consent form and backed up the story about your anxiety, the debt would vanish. He said it was a business transaction." I sat down in the armchair opposite him. "I need you to write that down." "Evan," he froze. "What?" "I need a signed statement." I said, "Detailing everything you just told me, the dictation, the bribe, the threat, everything." He shook his head frantically. "I cannot. If I put that in writing, he will destroy me." "He is already destroying you." "Evan," I said, my voice sharp, "he just kicked you out. He is calling the loan. You have nothing left to lose. The only way you get out of this is if we prove the whole thing is a fraud. If the fund is frozen, he cannot enforce the debt because the debt is part of the scam." Evan stared at me. He looked terrified. "But Mom," he whispered. "Mom is a hostage." I said, "We are going to free her, but I need ammunition." I went to my desk and grabbed a legal pad and a pen. I tossed them onto the coffee table in front of him. "Start writing," I said. I did not hug him. I did not tell him it was okay. It was not okay. He had betrayed me. But I understood him, and right now, I needed him. Evan picked up the pen. His hand trembled, but he started to write. The next morning, I called the hospital to check on Dad's transfer. "I am sorry. Ms. Ward," the nurse said, "your father was discharged 2 hours ago." "Discharged? To where?" "To Cedar Springs Rehabilitation Center." She said, "Okay," I said, "I will head over there." "Just a moment," the nurse said. "There is a note in the file. The family representative has requested that visitation be restricted to approved family members only for the first 48 hours, to facilitate acclimation and reduce stress." "And am I on the approved list?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "Let me see. The list includes Elise Ward, Derek Ward, and Sloan Ward." "I am sorry. Natalie, your name is not here." "Sloan, she had done it. Why are you making this harder?" "Thank you," I said. I hung up. I did not cry. I did not call Sloan to beg. I opened my file cabinet. I pulled out a document I had drafted with Marin Hale, but hoped I would not have to use. It was a copy of my father's advance medical directive from 5 years ago. It listed my mother as the primary agent, but it listed me, Natalie Ward, as the alternate agent if the primary was unavailable or acting contrary to the patient's best interests. Blocking a daughter from seeing her father was contrary to his best interests. I drove to Cedar Springs. It was a fancy facility in the rolling hills of Maryland, more like a country club than a hospital. I walked up to the front desk. "I am here to see Graham Ward," I said. The receptionist checked her computer. "I am sorry. Visitors are restricted." I placed the document on the counter. "This is a legal medical directive," I said. "I am his daughter and his alternate healthcare proxy. Restricting my access without a court order is a violation of patient rights. If you do not let me in, my attorney, who is on speed dial, will be filing a complaint with the state licensing board within the hour." The receptionist blinked. She looked at the document. She looked at me. She saw the steel in my eyes. "One moment," she said. "She made a call. She whispered. She nodded. You can go in," she said stiffly. "Room 104. But please, keep it brief. We do not want to upset the patient." I walked down the carpeted hallway. I found room 104. My father was sitting up in a wheelchair by the window. He looked better. The color had returned to his cheeks. Elise was not there. Sloane was not there. Derek was not there. It was just him. "Dad?" I said. He turned. His eyes lit up. "Natalie," he said. His speech was slurred, but clear. "You came." "Of course I came," I said. I kissed his forehead. "They said you were busy," he said. "Sloane said you were working." Sloane lied. I said, I pulled up a chair. I looked around the room. His suitcase was in the corner. A canvas satchel he used for his books and papers was sitting on the floor next to the nightstand. "Dad," I said, "I need to ask you something. Do you remember the amendments?" He frowned. A look of distress crossed his face. "The papers," he muttered. "Derek brought them. He said I needed to sign." "Did you sign them?" I asked. I do not know," he said. "I was so tired. I told him to wait. I told him I needed to read them, but he kept pushing. He looked at the satchel. He left them," Graham whispered. "He said I should look at them when I woke up." My heart hammered. I reached for the satchel. I opened it. Inside were his reading glasses, a copy of The Economist, and a blue folder. I opened the folder. It was a legal document. Fourth Amendment to Wardridge Partnership Agreement. I scanned it. Section 4.2. Removal of beneficiaries. The general partner, Derek Ward, shall have sole discretion to determine the standing and eligibility of limited partners and beneficiaries under this agreement. Natalie Ward shall be reclassified as a discretionary beneficiary, subject to quarterly review. Distributions, if any, shall be made solely at the general partner's discretion. It was the death warrant for my inheritance. It gave Derek total control. I flipped to the last page. Signature of Graham Ward. It was blank. He hadn't signed it. I felt a rush of triumph so dizzying I almost laughed. They had tried to force him. They had bullied him while he was having a stroke. But Graham Ward, stubborn to the end, had refused to sign without reading, and in the chaos of the collapse, the ambulance, and the transfer, they had lost track of the physical document. They thought they had it. Or maybe they thought he had signed it and it was in the pile. But it was here, unsigned, which meant the Third Amendment was still in force, and under the Third Amendment, I was a full partner. I looked at my father. "You did good." "Dad," I whispered. "You did so good." I took the document. I folded it. I put it in my purse. This was the shield. This was the sword. And I was going to use it to cut them all down. The conference room at Hawthorne and Weller, LLP, was designed to intimidate. It featured a mahogany table long enough to land a small aircraft on, leather chairs that swallowed you whole, and a panoramic view of the D.C. skyline that whispered power. I sat at the head of the table. To my right sat Mr. Weller, my father's attorney, looking like a disappointed grandfather. To my left sat Marin Hale, my own attorney, looking like a shark smelling blood in the water. Opposite us sat my family. Derek took the center seat. Naturally. He wore a navy suit that cost more than my car. His posture relaxed. His hands folded on the table. He looked like the chairman of the board. Elise sat next to him, looking small and pale. She kept glancing at the door as if expecting the police to burst in. Sloane sat on Derek's other side, scrolling through her phone with aggressive indifference. Though I noticed her leg bouncing under the table. Evan sat at the far end, slumped in his chair, staring at a knot in the wood grain. They thought this was a meeting to clarify medical decision-making protocols. That was the pretext, Mr. Weller had used to summon them. "Thank you all for coming," Mr. Weller began, his voice gravelly and calm. "As you know, Graham's condition is stable, but his recovery will be long. Natalie requested this meeting to ensure that we are all aligned regarding his care and his affairs." Derek smiled. It was a benevolent, patronizing smile. "Of course, Arthur," Derek said, "we are all here for Graham, though I admit, I am surprised Natalie felt the need to involve outside counsel." He nodded toward Marin. "It seems a bit excessive for a family discussion, but if it helps her feel more secure, We are happy to indulge it. He turned his gaze to me. Natalie, honey, he said, his voice dripping with concern. I know you are overwhelmed. We all are. But bringing lawyers into this? It just shows how much you are struggling to cope. We are not your enemies. We are your family. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had sat at my dinner table for 30 years, the man who had bought me ice cream, the man who was currently stealing my father's legacy. I did not smile back. I am not overwhelmed. Derek, I said, I am prepared. Derek sighed, looking at Elise. See, he said softly. This is exactly what we were worried about. The paranoia, the defensiveness. She is imagining conspiracies because she cannot handle the grief. Elise looked at me, her eyes pleading. Natalie, please, she whispered. Just let Derek handle the details. He knows what is best. I let the silence stretch. I let them sit in it. I let Derek believe, for one more minute, that his narrative was working. Then I opened the file folder in front of me. I am not here to discuss my feelings. I said, I am here to discuss facts. And the fact is, Uncle Derek, that you have been very busy. I slid the first document across the polished wood. It was the behavioral risk summary. Derek's eyes flicked to it. He did not flinch. What is this? He asked. It is an attachment sent from Mom's email account to mine. I said, though I believe it was intended for Sloan, it describes me as emotionally volatile and financially reckless. It recommends removing me as a beneficiary. Sloan stopped scrolling. She looked up, her face pale. I did not send that, she stammered. No, I said, but you edited it. You tweaked the language to make it sound more clinical. Isn't that what you said in the group chat? Sloane's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Derek chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. Natalie, really, this is a draft, a contingency. We have to prepare for all scenarios. Given your history of anxiety, I cut him off. My history of anxiety consists of 1 week off work 3 years ago. I said, my credit score is 815. I have 0 debt. And unlike you, Derek, I do not operate out of a mailbox. I slid the second photo across the table. It was the picture of the strip mall in Caldwell Heights, the vape shop, the nail salon, and the Postal Plus Center with the address of Briar Ledger Advisory. Derek stiffened. It was subtle. A tightening of the jaw. A stillness in the hands. But I saw it. Briar Ledger. Advisory. I said, the firm you hired to manage the fund. The firm receiving $12,500 a month in consulting fees. Elise leaned forward, squinting at the photo. What is this? She asked. That is Derek's office. Mom, I said. Or rather, it is the mailbox he rented to pretend he had an office. There is no firm. There are no advisors. It is just a shell company used to siphon money out of the partnership. That is ridiculous. Derek snapped. His voice lost its warmth. We use a registered agent for privacy. That is standard practice. Is it standard practice to start the payments the day after Dad had his first stroke? I asked. I slid the spreadsheet across the table. July 15th. I said, Dad gets dizzy. July 16th. Briar Ledger gets $12,000. August, September, October. Every month. Like clockwork. You did not hire help. Derek, you saw an opportunity. Elise picked up the spreadsheet. Her hands were shaking. Derek? She whispered. What is this? You said they were experts. They are experts, Derek insisted. Turning to her. Elise, do not listen to her. She is twisting everything. This is complex financial structuring. You do not understand the tax implications. I understand theft. I said. I looked at Sloan. And you. I said, you signed the statement regarding my suitability. You told the trustee I was a risk. I pushed the letter from Crescent Vale toward her. My attorney, Marin, cleared her throat. Ms. Ward, Marin said, looking at Sloan. I should inform you that submitting false statements to a trustee to influence beneficiary standing is a form of fraud. If the trustee determines that you knowingly provided false information to facilitate the misappropriation of funds, you could be held personally liable. That means your assets, your future earnings, everything. Sloane looked at Marin, then at Derek. The color drained from her face completely. You said it was legal, she whispered to Derek. You said it was just a formality to protect the house. It is legal, Derek shouted. He slammed his hand on the table. We are protecting the family from her. He pointed a finger at me. She is going to freeze everything, he yelled. She is going to demand audits. She is going to drag us through court until the banks foreclose on every property we own. I did what I had to do to save this family. So you admit it, I said quietly. You admit you engineered the review to cut me out. I am admitting that I am the only one with the guts to make the hard decisions. Derek roared. The room fell silent. His outburst hung in the air, ugly and raw. Elise put her head in her hands and started to cry. It was not a polite cry. It was a jagged, gasping sob. I trusted you. She wept. I signed whatever you gave me. I thought we were safe. We are safe, Derek hissed. If you just shut up and let me handle this. No, Evan said. We all turned. Evan had not moved the entire time. He was still staring at the table. What did you say? Derek asked, his voice low and dangerous. I said no. Evan repeated. He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it down the table toward Mr. Weller. This is a statement, Evan said, his voice trembling but clear. It details how Derek promised to forgive my $50,000 debt if I supported the restructuring. It details how he dictated the risk summary to the guy at the mailbox place. It details how he threatened to ruin me if I told Natalie. Derek stared at the paper. For a second, he looked like he might lunge across the table and strangle his nephew. You ungrateful little... Derek snarled. After everything I did for you, I paid your rent. I fixed your car. I kept you out of jail when you got that DUI. And you used it all against me, Evan shouted back. Standing up. You bought me. You bought all of us. That is not love. Derek, that is leverage. Love is leverage. The words rang through the room. I looked at my family. I saw the wreckage. Sloane, terrified for her own skin. Elise, broken by the realization that her safety net was a trap. Evan, finally standing tall in the ruins of his own mistakes. But I was not done. Mr. Weller, I said, play the tape. Mr. Weller nodded. He placed a small digital recorder on the table. We received a voicemail on our office line last week. Mr. Weller explained. It was an attempt to schedule an urgent appointment to amend the partnership agreement. The caller identified himself as Graham Ward. He pressed play. The voice that filled the room was raspy, strained. It sounded like my father. It had his cadence. It had his pauses. Hello, this is Graham. I need to come in. We need to push the Fourth Amendment through. Natalie she is becoming a problem. I need to secure the assets. Call me back at the mobile number ending in 45. Elise looked up, her eyes wide. That is Graham, she whispered. No, Mom, I said. Listen, Mr. Weller continued. When our security team called the number back, they asked a security question. What was the name of your first dog? I looked at Derek. You said Rover. Derek's face turned a color I had never seen before, a sickly, gray-green pallor. Dad's first dog was named Barnaby. I said, you did not know that because you were not born yet. Dad was 10 when he got Barnaby. You came along 5 years later. I leaned forward. You impersonated him. Derek, while he was lying in a hospital bed, confused and helpless. You called his lawyer pretending to be him to cut me out of his will. That is not estate planning. That is a felony. Derek slumped back in his chair. The fight went out of him all at once. He looked old. He looked tired. I did it for us, he whispered. It was a pathetic, hollow sound. The market is turning. Natalie, the fund is illiquid. I needed to move the assets into a high-yield vehicle. I needed the authorization. If I waited for probate, we would have missed the window. You gambled, I said. You gambled with money that was not yours. And you lost. Derek looked at me. His eyes were wet. Natalie, he said, listen to me. We can fix this. He leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. I can make this right. I will step down as the general partner. I will sign it over. But we do not need to make this public. If this goes to court, the reputation of the family, it will be destroyed. He paused, licking his lips. I can offer you a settlement, a lump sum, $300,000, cash, today, and a separate account for your share of the real estate. You will be independent. You will never have to ask me for a dime again. He slid a hand toward me, palm up. All I ask is that we sign a confidentiality agreement. We seal the records. We withdraw the request for the audit. We keep this in the room, for your father's sake. I looked at his hand. It was the same hand that had patted my back at graduation, the same hand that had signed the checks to Briar Ledger. He was offering me a bribe to hide his crime. He did not care about the family. He cared about staying out of prison. I looked at Mr. Weller. I looked at Marin. I picked up the pen sitting in front of me. No, I said. Derek blinked. What? No settlement. I said, no confidentiality clause, no gag order. Natalie, please. I want a full, independent forensic accounting of the Wardridge Partnership and the Ward Family Fund dating back 10 years. I said, I want every penny traced. I want every transfer to Briar Ledger repaid with interest. I stood up, and I want a pause on all amendments. No one signs anything. No one changes a single comma until Graham Ward walks out of that rehab center, sits in this chair, and tells us what he wants. But the exposure, Derek stammered. You should have thought about that before you rented the mailbox. I said, I turned to my mother. Mom, come with me. You can stay at my place. Elise looked at me. Then she looked at Derek. He was broken, defeated, staring at the table. But he was familiar. I cannot, she whispered. Mom, I said, he stole from us. He is my brother, she said, and I cannot drive in the city. I need a ride home. She stood up. She did not look at me. She walked over to Derek and put a hand on his shoulder. Come on, Derek, she said softly. Let's go home. Derek stood up. He gathered his papers with shaking hands. He did not look at me. He walked out of the room, and my mother followed him. Sloane sat there for a moment, looking at the empty doorway. Then she pulled out her phone and started typing frantically. I have to go, she muttered. I have to call my own lawyer. She ran out. Evan sat at the end of the table. He looked at me. I am sorry. Nat, he said again. I know. I said, go home. Evan. He stood up and walked out. His shoulders hunched. The door closed. The room was silent. I sat back down in the leather chair. We will file the injunctions immediately, Marin said softly. We have everything we need. You won, Natalie. I looked out the window at the skyline. The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of purple and gold. I had the documents. I had the truth. I had saved the fund. But my mother had left with the thief. My sister hated me. My brother was broken. And my father was lying in a room 10 miles away, waiting for a family that no longer existed. I had won. But as I sat there, listening to the scratch of Mr. Weller's pen on paper, I realized that the price of the truth was every illusion I had ever held dear. I was the responsible one. I was the strong one. And I was entirely alone. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of uncovering the secrets of the Ward family. If you did, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Stories for more dramas about betrayal, justice, and the dark side of family dynamics. And please, share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Natalie made the right choice by refusing the settlement, even though it cost her relationship with her mother? I'd love to hear your take. Stay tuned for the next story.